the reason why we're running this introduction is because essentially this is a central strand to the Plymouth Commission work in the City of Plymouth. It's an investment in leadership, and it's an investment in evidence-based knowledge, particularly around some of the stubborn school improvement challenges that secondary schools are facing. And so it won't surprise you that it's leadership with a very heavy emphasis around literacy, oracy, disciplinary vocabulary, all the building blocks, all the really important elements that help contribute to a successful learner in terms of reading, writing, and so on. So we feel this is a really essential piece of work. It's seeking to improve the quality of leadership through implementation, through high quality implementation. John's going to unpack that. And obviously in terms of the content that what we know works in schools. So I'm going to now, sorry, I want to just say one other thing around this as well, is that whilst you're all representing your own individual schools, this is very much a Team Plymouth thing. You know, we're really clear in a commission perspective that if we're to make a difference, we have to do things at scale. And this is a classic example of a piece of work that we're going to do school by school, but together. And when I say together, you know, there are huge opportunities to share what's working and to collaborate and support each other in what's a critical piece of work. So that's my rather long-winded introduction. Over to you, John.
Right, hi everybody. So first of all, if you don't know me, I'm Jon Eaton from Kingsbridge Research School, the director of the research school. Tony's absolutely right. I'm very happy to take questions at any time. So you know, either on the mic or in the chat box. And if I can't see the screen because I'm showing slides, Tony, just let me know. That'll be fine. So let me get this on screen for you. Just let me know, Tony. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, all good.
Great. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about essentially are these points here. So I'm going to go through what the problem, what the project is, why it exists in the first place, the kind of context behind it, the kinds of things we're hoping to focus on. I want to use this as well to explain the different blocks, if you like, in the project, and give you some idea of who we would want to attend which. We've also got supporting this another layer of implementation leads. So this project is funded by the Teaching School Council and the EEF. Obviously, their core purpose is to attack disadvantage, to break that link between educational achievement and family income. So this is kind of really up their street, and hence they were very keen to fund it in the first place. And so part of that funding has allowed us to add this layer of implementation to the project as well. So I'll explain that a little bit later too. And then obviously talk about the intended impact. So firstly, the first reason really is to tackle the disadvantage gap. And I've just looking at the EPI's latest report, there are obviously some pretty stark and depressing figures from that. So we know, for example, that the attainment gap between disadvantaged pupils and their peers, according to the report, has stopped closing for the first time in a decade. There's something like an 18-month gap between disadvantaged pupils and their peers by the time they finish their GCSEs. And all of this is pre-COVID, so even more alarmingly, that doesn't take into account COVID-19 and the damage done there as well. And we also know there is quite a strong gap in Plymouth, particularly, not the only authority, but it's one of many. And even if you control for persistent disadvantage, that still remains quite a large gap. So that's really the purpose of it, to attack that disadvantage gap. And as I said, that really aligns with the EEF's core purpose as well. The second thing is that we know that what's effective when we're tackling the gap is attacking what happens in the classroom, so making a difference in the classroom. And if we look at, for example, the teaching and learning toolkit, we find that the strategies that really make a difference tend to be those ones that affect that day-to-day classroom experience. So those disadvantaged students need to be challenged every day in the classroom, but they also need to experience success in the classroom on that day-to-day basis. And we think this project is giving them the best chance of doing that. And the things that tend to be less effective are those kind of peripheral interventions. So people often focus on things like aspiration interventions and after-school programs and parental engagement. And I'm not saying those things aren't important. They clearly are in terms of relationship. But if, as I said, if those kids aren't experiencing challenge and success day to day, then it's unlikely that aspiration program in itself is going to make much of a difference. So we really want to focus on what happens in the classroom. So for that reason, we are looking at disciplinary literacy as the kind of core element of the program. We think this is something that essentially informs curriculum design, something that has an effect on pedagogy, that helps kind of build that sense of an inclusive pedagogy. We know that weak literacy, for example, is often a driver of various symptoms, things like poor attendance, poor behavior, difficulties with access to the curriculum, low prior knowledge, low vocabulary knowledge, all those kinds of things. So I'm not pretending it's a kind of magic bullet, but in terms of the range of possible initiatives, it's as close as probably as we're going to get. And it also includes things like a strong focus on metacognition, again, a very high impact classroom focused strategy. Another part of this program, and I'll come to this in a bit more detail in a second, is something called training and retaining great teachers. We also want to use this to model great implementation in the city as well. And we know that many of Plymouth schools already investigated the implementation guidance. We've seen implementation plans. That's really good. So I think we are building on a kind of strong base there. But we also want to make it a program that really kind of leaves expertise and helps build future leaders. Frankly, we know that poor CEPD is about sort of parachuting in with maybe a couple of days content, then leaving again and hoping that makes a difference. So we don't really want to do that kind of train and pray approach. What we want to do is kind of build expertise in the system and leave that expertise there as well. So those are the kind of core reasons for doing this in the first place. So let me tell you what the project involves. It kind of breaks into sort of three main elements. The first one you can see there, leading evidence-informed school improvement. If I just zoom in on that a sec. That is a kind of launch event, all right? And at the moment, we've got that penciled in for the 8th of January. We'll talk about timelines later, so don't, at the moment, scribble any dates down, but that is our first event. And for that one, what we really want is for it to be attended by head teachers and chairs of governors. That day is essentially going to be led by Professor Jonathan Sharples, who wrote the EEF's implementation guidance. We're going to focus during that day on understanding the disadvantage gap in more detail. We really want to spend a lot of time digging into the implementation guidance and then giving you an introduction to the literacy guidance support as well, because we know that to make these kind of these programs successful, we need buy-in basically from the top level of the school and from governors as well. So that's day one. And like I said, we'll talk about the timeline a little bit later. So the second section is the disciplinary literacy section. So we've called it Improving Subject Literacy, Unlocking Curriculum for All, just to represent the idea that this is about, it's not just a separate literacy initiative, it's something that we hope affects the curriculum and pedagogy as a whole. So if I zoom into that. So this is based on the Improving Secondary Literacy Guidance Report. I won't go through all this with you. But essentially, we want that to be attended by SLT with responsibility for CPD and curriculum. We want literacy leads, and I put, where possible, head teachers. We're very aware that times initially it's hard to carve out space. But ideally, if we get those people to their sessions, I think we give it the best chance of success. What you see on screen there, again, I'd urge you not to start scribbling dates down at the moment. This is currently our kind of modular online option, but we'll return to that later. It may look different when we get there. But essentially, it's very much based on that guidance support. So third section is training, retaining great teachers. This is at the moment a two-day program. In terms of who attends, we've said SLT, teaching and learning leads, curriculum leads. And I think as well, we want to use this as we said, to kind of develop those future leaders in the system. So it may be that as we implement the literacy part of the program, which if it's face-to-face will be a 3-day course, if it's online, we'll break into modules, but again, we'll return to it. This is a chance to try and develop those future leaders. So here we are focusing on things like CPD, running effective CPD within the school, leading curriculum change, and so on. And again, it's about building that expertise. So those are the kind of main strands of the project. I did mention at the beginning as well that we've got implementation leads to support the program. So let me just go into why we have those at all. So this section is based on EEF evaluations of their own programs so far. And what they found is when they look at the success of certain programs, they kind of depend on the interplay of 4 different factors. So we've got the quality of the evidence in the first place, that matters. You know, is it you know, a sort of trendy strategy that's going around Twitter, or is it something based on large-scale randomized control trials and guidance reports? So the quality of the evidence matters. Then we've got the research intermediaries. So that will be Kingsbridge Research School and obviously the EEF. And we know we've got people in the system in Plymouth already who've done some great work around literacy and implementation. We've got the school themselves, and that comes down to things like capacity. And then we've got the context of the wider school improvement system. So it's about the quality of the evidence, the presence of skilled research intermediaries, the receptiveness, the capacity of the school, and then the alignment with that kind of wider school system. And what they find looking at their evaluations of programs is often that when it comes to the schools, capacity is obviously an issue. So clearing space for programs, having the right people in place to lead them. So what we've tried to do and what the funding supports is this layer of implementation as well. So essentially, you can think of it as having the literacy guidance as one strand that runs throughout the program, and the training and retaining great teachers. But throughout, we're supporting that with implementation as well. So the whole thing is about leaving this this DNA, if you like, in the system. So it's not just about the courses we run, but it kind of stays there within Plymouth and informs other parts, other projects as well. And just to focus on a little quote from Becky Francis here. She says, the surface level compliance is the biggest threat to any change in education. And I think that's absolutely true. I think it's very often the case that we have schools who will look at, for example, the guidance reports, look at those headline recommendations, and very often it's really easy to kind of look at them and nod and think, yeah, we do all those things. But the actual, you know, the depth of understanding is what really makes a difference. So surface level compliance to evidence is not the same as that kind of deep understanding of the evidence and full implementation. So just to get a little bit more specific, in terms of the implementation leads, what's been funded is 3 half-day visits to each school, and then 3 coaching phone calls or online meetings per school as well. And I think it's really important here as well that I say this is not, it's really not an accountability measure. Okay, this really is a capacity measure. Again, looking at EEF evaluations, they know that often it's capacity where we get an issue when it comes to good implementation. So the intention of this is to support with that. So it could be, for example, that these implementation leads come in to look at or assist with implementation planning. We have school audit tools where we're looking at things like current literacy practices. And for example, we might help with gathering data. Okay, so current implementation leads you can see on the screen there. We'll talk about that nearer the time. So finally, just to get to the impact, the main aim really is to try and attack this disadvantage gap. And we know it's the hardest of problems. I heard Professor Rob Clow talking about this the other day. He called it more or less the definition of an impossible problem, but obviously we cannot throw up our arms and do nothing. The EPI report is really good at acknowledging this is not completely down to schools. Obviously, it involves policy change as well, but there are things that schools can do, and they tend to be what happens in the classroom. So that's really where we're putting all our focus here. So it is about attacking the disadvantage gap. It's about developing future leaders, building that really strong culture of implementation, that really sustained culture as well, and then focusing on literacy specifically, because, as I said, you're targeting the classroom, you've got that inclusive pedagogy, you've got this principles of metacognition, and it's really trying to attack some of the symptoms of socio-economic disadvantage. Okay, and I've just tried to anticipate a few questions. I'm sure there'll be others, but so the first one there is, does this mean we all need to adopt the same approach? So I think it's really important to be clear at the beginning that although we are using the same guidance, we are using the same evidence base, part of the process is schools developing an implementation plan for their context. So that could be that certain schools decide to focus on, let's say, reading, others might decide to focus on writing. And that decision is going to be based on like a thorough audit of current practice, what's already happening, and also what are our needs as well. So the same with the second question, does that replace existing literacy practices? So I would say it's certainly not about the automatic replacement of anything. I think it's about a kind of good, hard stare at what's going on already, and thinking about where we can make greater gains and what existing good practice we can develop further. So I guess, Tony and we can come to this online or face-to-face question in a second. And I've also put on the slides there who should attend which sessions. I'm really happy to make this slides available to anybody as well. So just let me know if that is helpful. So let me stop sharing there. And then I guess we can open that to questions. And Tony, have you got any follow-up comments?
Thanks very much, John. Excellent.
Right.
I hope, so not only we will make the slides available, but we'll make the recording of the session available for colleagues to listen to. So, I mean, just a couple of other things. Obviously, the program is fully funded, so there are no costs to schools for attending the training or paying for training. Obviously, there's an organisational cost if you're releasing staff to the programs. That's your commitment to the training that we're providing. So before we get into the timeline and things like that, I've not got any questions on the chat or in the Q&A function. Does anyone want to ask anything? Hands up, or any questions at all?
I'll put my email in as well, Tony. If people want to email direct, that's absolutely fine. Okay,
fine. So if people think of a question, that's fine. So the next thing I want to discuss with you are the three delivery models that we have. So my absolute preferred model for delivery is a face-to-face delivery model. I think it's important in terms of how we put across that information, but it's also important around all the informal networking opportunities that exist when we're all embarked on the same journey, albeit using different implementation plans with different nuanced priorities. Nevertheless, there is just so much to be gained by working collaboratively and effectively together. So the plan at the moment is for the launch event to be at China Fleet on January the 8th. That said, we all think that's highly unlikely. We feel that given what we know about what's happening in Plymouth at the moment, given Christmas, where there's likely to be a spike in COVID cases, and the uncertainty of early January, option 2 would be a delivery online in a schedule that we would pre-publish for colleagues. Now, this is where I really want your opinion, because there is a third option that neither John has talked to the Education Endowment Foundation and I haven't talked to Plymouth City Council yet. But it is the question about whether or not schools have the current capacity to absorb this programme, recognising the disruption that is going on in schools and recognising that there is likely to be continued disruption in the spring term. So the third option is that we actually push this programme back to right the back end of the spring term or early part of the summer term, where we do a launch, which gives us a little bit more breathing space, and hopefully we'll be in a place of some greater certainty with vaccination rollouts and so on. So I'm just asking people for your view about that. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to type your view into the chat function. So, if you broadly support option 3, which is a delay, because actually you're in your schools, you're thinking actually the capacity to engage is going to be hard early on in the spring term. I'd like to know about that. If you think you have got the capacity and you think it should be online, fine. Or if you just think it should be face-to-face, full stop, and we'll schedule it whenever, I'd like to know about it. So I'm hoping that you're all typing away now in the chat function.
Is it just worth saying as well that if it was face-to-face, essentially for the literacy bit, you're looking at a 3-day program. For training, retaining great teachers, we're looking at a 2-day program. And then obviously the launch would be probably a half day. If it was modular online, I reckon if we're doing the literacy element would probably be 9 modules, something like 1.5 hour webinars spread over a longer period of time. And probably say 5 or 6 for training and retaining great teachers.
Okay, so Julie's up for option 3. She feels that would be a good. Matthew Bindon saying delay for us at ACE. Martin Cox is saying option 3 would be top option. Second choice would be online. So, I'm kind of thinking, we're not far away from this. Yeah, and Krista's making the point that actually this won't stop us from a commission point, continuing with the literacy support that we're giving schools. It just means a cleaner launch to the program. Okay, so I think on that basis, the actions are, John, you're going to go back to the Education Endowment Foundation. Yep. I'm going to go back to Plymouth City Council, and I'm going to consult with Lisa Borman and the MAT CEOs just to get their opinion, and then we'll publish something with a plan. Okay, so I don't see any reason to Sarah Oakley saying, I think pushing it back to no face-to-face delivery. However, I'm only literacy coordinator, consult SLT. Hey Sarah, you're not only the literacy coordinator. That is definitely not the case. So yeah, fine. I mean, we'll pick up your leadership group as well through some of the other consultations that we'll do as well. Okay, I think that's about it, unless anyone else has anything to say. Really grateful for your time, John. Grateful for everyone else's time. I hope you got a better overview now of the programme. We'll publish the slides and the recording should you want to access that again, and we'll make it all happen. Thanks, Martin. We're really looking forward to this. We think it's going to be a really exciting piece of work for the City of Plymouth, but we need to get
definitely.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone.